Jamie from Inky&Scrappy, sharing with you today card 1 in my So Amazing stamp set series featuring Lawn Fawn's So Very Nice and Sewn with Love stamp sets, as well as their How You Been with the button add-on stamp set. And then, of course, as I go, I will bring in a few more Lawn Fawn stamp sets that coordinate very well with those Sewing Mice and the Sewn with Love stamp set. I am using my Ohuhu bullet nib markers today. I included my color combos that are not on my pre-done color combo sheet here on the screen, so if you want to grab those, I will try to remember to list them on my blog post. Otherwise, they are other colors that I've done before, so they should have a color guide on my Ohuhu color combo page on my blog. So if you're interested in that, that is at www.InkyandScrappy.com. So feel free to go and grab what you want from there. Most of this is going to get colored off camera. My camera died and I didn't switch the battery out. I just kind of took all of my stuff and went in the other room to color. I colored everything. I colored everything to color combos. So this card series is really going to concentrate on the colors that you see, and I'm kind of going to stay with it. I love doing card series with the same colors because I can color a bulk of images, and then I just go back, and if I need to add a few more pieces, I can. But I probably colored for 5 hours to get all of my images done. Granted, I currently have 5 cards done. I have 2 more that I have images already colored for, and I kind of have them laid out. I just have not been able to sit down and get them done. So here are all the colors that I actually used for all of my things. So if you are interested in that, I will put the still of that one up on my blog as well. Isn't that glorious? The best part of the Brother Scan and Cut is I can just throw them on there and cut everything out at once, and it saves me a lot of time in the long run. So if you're on the fence, it's not, I mean, it doesn't give me as pretty of a cut as the dies, but it definitely saves me a lot of time. And most people don't really look at that anyways if you're not a card maker that loves coordinating dies. I know, it's hard for me sometimes, but it saves so much time, especially when we're talking that many images. Of course, for my How You Been shaker, I do have just the shaker dies. I don't have the actual How You Been die set because really all I wanted was the shaker from that one, and so I just bought the shaker set, and so I did use the shaker for that one. You will see me modify my lid on this one because it doesn't cut it the same as, and sometimes I will cut it out with the actual How You Been add-on die. I did not this time. I'm bringing in an oldie but a goodie stamp set from close to my heart. This one is called Stitched ABCs, I think. I paused at the beginning here so you could actually see it. But you wouldn't need it, but it's one of my favorite ones for adding stitching. So I want to say about 12 years ago, I would say it was probably about 12 years ago, stitching in card making and scrapbooking was all the rage. And so I still have all of those things, and that's kind of when this stamp set was introduced. The other thing, you wouldn't need it. You could do anything that is a very fine detail, like a fine line letter, you could definitely do, and then just poke dots in an equidistant apart so you can get the stitching guide. I would do it probably. I did this one in River Rock. You could definitely go in Jellyfish if you want to hide those lines a little bit more. This just, if you can find a stamp set that has the stitching for letters, it's amazing. It just saves a lot of time, and they look, uniform. And granted, I did my brother's memorial quilt square for the Legacy Foundation. I just printed a scripty font, laid it out, traced it, and stitched it on fabric from there. So you totally don't need that option, But when you're working with paper, it's a lot easier to pierce the paper before you start stitching on it, as it saves, you know, a little bit of frustration later on. Because finding where to come through on paper is a lot harder than finding where to come through on a piece of fabric. Just saying. So I did take my floss here and separate out 3 strands. I wouldn't have had to probably, but I wanted to kind of cut down on the bulk on the back of the card. Not that I needed to, but I didn't feel I needed that super thick 6 strands for this one. I also didn't want to have to push them through that hole and make any, I don't know how to say it, but make those holes bigger than they needed to be. So going with 3, it's bulky enough, but also thin enough that I'm not gonna, you know, make that paper separate a whole lot. And you could definitely just tie, not on the end here. I just chose to do some Scotch adhesive tape to secure my end there. I'm not too worried about it coming out because, again, it's paper. It's going to be glued on to my card panel front. So I will speed this up and go super fast. I wish it was this fast in real time. It takes me forever to stitch. Just going back and forth, I don't know, it's kind of a backward stitch, but sometimes I do a forward stitch. Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason. I just want to make a solid line. So can't make a solid line by going through the same hole in a row, so you have to kind of go back and forth, you know. It ended up being that I cut my string almost perfectly. So I did get it all done in one full swoop. There is the back, so you can kind of see where you have that stitch line. And yeah, so some of that was a back stitch, some of it was just forward stitching. It was, I just make it so it's one solid line on the front side. That's all I was really worried about. Now, for my little mouse, I thought it would be fun to make him hold a needle up above with string on it. And my original intent was going to be to use the stitching that, or the twine or the thread, sorry, the thread that I was using to stitch. Since I had run out anyways, I opted to bring in this, I would say it's more of a twine. Not quite sure if it's hemp, but it's got a little bit more starchiness to it, so it's not going to be as, it's going to hold a little bit more shape to it, I guess is where I'm going with this one. Now, because my needle here is cut with the Brother Scan and Cut, I couldn't do a second die through. If I would have had the die, I would have done a second die cut through it and then made sure it was a little bit thicker and a little bit more stable to run that twine through it. I end up having to fix it later on because it ends up breaking through the side because, you know, it happens. So once I have that set, I need to finish my shaker jar because that is my focal point on, well, I guess it's my focal point on this one. And if I'm going to do the How You Bean jar, you better believe it's probably going to be in shaker form. I very rarely ever, I don't even know if I've ever done one that's not a shaker. I can't recall ever doing one that's not a shaker. I usually always turn it into a shaker. I went around the outside with some of that dot adhesive and then of course added a little bit of glue around to the outside. Now the secret of using glue on your shaker cover here is to not have to wiggle it around so you don't get that adhesive on the front clear part of your shaker. I'm usually pretty good about making sure that I'm, you know, set with where it's going when I do it. So I did remember to add on the lid to the front of my shaker jar, not on, you know, the front of my back piece. Now, because I used the Brother Scan and Cut for my shaker lid here, I did have to come in and trim a little bit just because I didn't want it to look like you could see that it was an add-on part. Granted, a lot of times I will just take that shaker lid and cut it out with the actual shaker add-on die for the big piece and then just cut off the bottom part so they line up perfectly. I didn't this time just because of where they were positioned on my stamp sheets when I cut everything out. So I just modified, like I needed to. I'm bringing in some Crescent Creations foam adhesive here. These ones are extra thick, kind of like a double layer of double-sided tape here. So one and done with this one, which is kind of nice. And I didn't remove that backing until I was almost done. But if you remove the backing for the most part on both sides, it wiggles around those corners and or circles fairly easily. And, makes it a lot easier to make your shaker feature. I am bringing in Trinity Stamps Cave Crystals for my fill-in on this one, and then some clear seed beads. I wanted to go with something that was clear but circular because I wanted the buttons to show through, and I thought about putting some mini buttons in here, but I really didn't want to take away from those bigger buttons, and I didn't feel like putting big buttons in there. I could have done some of the cutout pieces of buttons and added those in there as well, but a lot of times they just get caught when you're shaking it. So I just went with the cave crystals and the seed beads. They add a little bit of shimmer and shine, and of course that glorious shaking sound when you add those seed beads. So I'm just going to add the mouse onto the top of my jar here. So he's all proud of himself for getting, all of his stitching done, celebrating on the top of his shaker. I don't know. It sounded good, right? It's like a mom trophy, right? The jar full of buttons. Who else has jars full of buttons? I have a jar full of buttons from my Grandma Pat, and I have a jar full of buttons from my Grandma Leona. I can't even say that I use them because they're from my grandma. I do once in a while. I'll pull out if I'm doing a special card for a relative. I will pull out from the appropriate grandma's button bin. Grandma Hamish's buttons. She's got some amazing vintage buttons that, I like to just look at them. They're pretty. And so here's where my twine had kind of cut through. So I'm just going to take a piece of Scotch tape here, cut it down, and of course everything was sticking and not working as I wanted it to. It happens. So ultimately I end up taking it and then just, instead of trying to be perfect on my getting it to line up and fold in half and over with my second piece, because yes, by the time I got it there, my fingers were sticking to everything, and do you ever just, so it just kept, it was being a turkey, and so I ended up losing the one piece, grabbing the other piece, and I just put it to the side, folded it over, and you know what? They make this thing called a scissors, and you can just cut off whatever's overhanging that didn't work quite how I'd planned on, your original fold. I don't know why I struggle sometimes as much as I do. Like, just, you have a scissors for a reason, child. Use it. So I am going to pop up that needle because I want it to be at the same level as the mouse. So this one was thin enough. I want to say these ones are like 1/8 of an inch thick on this one. So there's two of them in the Crescent Creation shop. One of them is 1/8 inch and the other one is 1/4 of an inch. And so I'm using the 1/8 inch one, and then of course I had to cut that one down a little bit more to get to the tip of the needle there. And then once I have that all on, I am going to pull off the backing here, line it up where I need it, add a little drop of glue. And then secure it on place, and then clean up my little glue overage there with my double-sided, or with my reverse tweezers. And then I'm coming in with a fine liner just to sharpen the line around that needle a little bit. I kind of lost a little bit of that detail with it cutting apart there, and I wanted to make sure that it looked crisp. And so by adding that in there, I could do that. And now for that extra little tail here. So I did kind of loop it underneath and around, so it's not hanging off to the side too much. So I think I looped it through twice. So then it kind of kept onto itself, or stayed on itself, and cut that one off. Now to finish it up, there's a little bit of a blank spot up there, and I haven't really decided much on my sentiment besides the big old stitched mom in front. And so I needed to figure out a sentiment. So I am bringing in Avery L's little, I think they're called Simple Sentiment dies. I do have a little cheat sheet for my thing. It makes lining these up a lot easier in my Misty. And then I actually have them on a sticky sheet. So I just pull out that sticky sheet on the back, and then I, save the other piece for the other one. It works beautifully. So for the You Mean So Much, Mom, so I wanted to be the You Mean So Much, comma. Well, I stole the comma from, I think it was a part of an apostrophe, maybe? I don't know. From the How You Know, just your type-stamp set. But my letters were too close to the edge on the so much, so you really can't see it. In my head, I know it's there. That's all that matters. And then I brought in the big scissors, or the bigger scissors from Sewn with Love, and then the bigger spools of thread from that set as well. I did end up having to color these above and beyond what I'd already had colored, just because I wanted the thread on them to be black to match my thread. And then I'm just going to add in the You Mean So Much to Me on the top there. It kind of fit perfectly next to that mouse on top of the jar. And so I like the placement on those ones. And then adding a few of those cave crystals onto the front to bring those shaker bits onto the front of the card. And I like working in threes, although it kind of looks like I worked in pairs on this one on the finished card. And then I was going to put it on the pink cardstock because I was thinking it was one size smaller on my front, but it wasn't, so I just pulled in a regular white card base because you weren't going to see the pink anyways. And then because it's got that stitching on the back, I'm going to bring in my wider score tape here. A, to help make sure that that holds all of the thread in place, but also because then it will stick well to the card and I don't have to worry about it, becoming loose on the bottom, just because it's bulkier and kind of has a little bit more, bulk onto the bottom. Then I will add that onto my card base. And of course, I needed to bring in some glossy accents to make that needle a little bit on the glossy side. Now, in hindsight, I could have heat embossed that needle in a silver embossing powder, which would have turned out really cool looking. But, it's always, sometimes, I think of these things after the fact. And then I needed some glitter because, I had to have a little bit of glitter. I added a little bit of glitter to my scissor handles and then on my thread for my spools. And then I'm going to bring in my black Jelly Glaze pen to just do some little glossy eyes on my mouse here. I like to make sure that it is working super well before I start, and I haven't used it for a while, so it took a little bit more time. And then I'm just going to do 2 little dots there, and it really adds a little something something to the card. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, all of those wonderful things. It helps the channel to grow, and it will alert you when new videos go up. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye!